Divorced people, what was the final straw? Selfishness by one or both parties is always the final straw. Marriages can rarely survive one selfish partner. It is 100% fatal to the marriage when both parties are selfish. To be clear, selfishness can present itself in many ways, including dishonesty, deception, infidelity, financial selfishness, emotional selfishness, etc. Successful marriage require both partners to give more than they take, to consider the other partner's feelings, needs, etc. above their own. When both partners are equally committed to this sacrificial love, the marriage will usually happily last a lifetime. We had been doing nothing but arguing for about a year and a half. Finally, one afternoon we stopped arguing and started actually discussing things as intelligent people. She got a call from a friend who needed help, and I said she should not go and we should finish the work we had started. Finally, we compromised on her leaving for a couple of hours to help her friend, and we would pick up our talk when she returned. She never returned until the next day. That's when I realized that saving the marriage was not that important to her final straw and started my plans to leave. After 2 years, multiple relapses, and a separation, we decided to work things out. I had to take my friend out of town to buy a car and told my husband I'd be home around 6. I was very excited to be early and surprise him. As I turned down our block at 5, I noticed his car coming down the block, stopped one house early and tossed something in the dumpster. I waited momentarily till he pulled into the garage, then drove up to the dumpster. It was a beer can he tossed. He was drinking and driving with our kids after all of that. Came in and immediately tossed him out. We had weathered storms of arguments, navigated through the maze of disagreements, but when it came to the temperature setting, all hell broke loose. I preferred a cozy 72 degrees, while my ex insisted on living in what felt like an Arctic igloo at a brisk 60. We tried compromise, but our thermostat tug-of-war reached a freezing point. The divorce papers might as well have had irreconcilable temperature differences stamped across them. Lesson learned: love may be warm, but compromise is the real thermostat of a lasting relationship. I stayed for way too long. We got married in college. When he couldn't keep a job, I decided to focus on a career where I'd have decent income. When we had kids, they were mine to raise, not his. When he had an affair, I told him I'd give it 6 months to see whether we could work it out. He spent those 6 months trying to convince me to sleep with someone else and have an open marriage. Nothing against open marriage, it's just not for me. I finally realized that it wasn't working. That was in 2009, and life is much better. When we went to a couples therapist, it was a session in all about why I was a bad partner and didn't show enough affection. Our kids were fed and ready for school, had meals and clothes for the next day. The dishes were done. The laundry was folded. The cats were fed, and the wine was chilled enough for her. I lacked energy. The following week she didn't wish me a happy Father's Day, and that night we decided to call it quits. He always found fault with anything I did, regardless of what I did or how I did it. As usual, this one night he went on a rampage again, screaming at me about something so insignificant that light switch in my brain just went from on to off. I never had a fuck off fund before, but at that specific time, my bonus that he had earmarked for another one of his projects was still in my bank account, so I could bugger off. Best decision I ever made. Our marriage was miserable for both of us. We'd been to many marriage counselors over the past few years. During a counseling session, the counselor mentioned that some couples are just better off divorced. It was an offhand comment not related to us specifically, but for me it was an epiphany. I realized on the way home that it was over. I left about 4 weeks later, and my only regret since is that I didn't leave years earlier. Had been married for about 5 years, turned 30 during those years, and had a bit of a crisis about being 30, and my life was going nowhere. Asked husband what we were going to do with the rest of our lives. Did not plan on spending the rest of my life doing nothing because that was about all we did. He didn't want children, and he mostly didn't want to do much of anything, so I guess you could say he bored me so much that I left. When I had to call the police and have him arrested for domestic violence, leave for a while, that he had emotionally abused me to the point that I feared he would get custody of our son if I left because he told me he'd take our son away, and make sure he grew up to hate me. After he crossed the line into physical violence, my son and I left. Second best decision I ever made. First best was having my son. I grew up with parents who hated each other. My dad was dying and my mum refused to even visit him in hospice. I saw this and promised myself that I wouldn't stay with my husband anymore. My counselor convinced me that I made the decision out of grief, so I stayed. 3 months later, after 18 years of his abuse and infidelity, he accused me of cheating with a friend who was like a brother to me. I was done. One night, after manifesting another argument, he threw his ring at me screaming for a divorce for the second time, and left the house. That night, I got the best night's sleep I'd had in months, called our marriage counselor and my therapist the next morning to get their take. Both conversations were less than 5 minutes long and each said it was over. He was shocked when I served him papers, finding out that she had resigned to never be happy in the marriage, her words, and that she did not want to go to therapy to try to improve the relationship, because she said it doesn't matter. And then all the subsequent passive aggressiveness, stonewalling, and silent treatment. I went and got therapy for myself and figured out what I wanted. Turned out I wanted to get the fuck out. We were fighting constantly. During a screaming match, she ran into the bathroom. I pulled the door open. She tried to kick me in the balls. I looked down. To my horror, my fist was cocked. I looked between her and my hand and curled my fingers, said this needs to end now, turned around and calmly walked out. Neither of our proudest moments, but no one was hurt, and we had 100 clarity. We had opened our marriage and it wasn't going well because he was an asshole. He asked me to break up with my girlfriend while we worked out our issues, and I said that I would, on the condition that he see a therapist about his drinking. He refused, and so did I. That was the last straw. I'm married to the girlfriend now, and she's such a better partner than he ever was. She didn't want to work after I paid for 2 of her degrees out of pocket. She didn't want to clean, but as soon as I got home I had to start cooking and clean the place and take the trash out. All this was going on for 3 years. Final straw was, she didn't want to put out as well. Not even the most basic thing you can think of. That went on for almost a year. I left. Made a poor financial decision which almost led to us getting evicted. He did not tell me until he figured it out. However, he discussed the matter with people at work. He also had extreme anger issues and drank a lot. The final straw was when my 7-year-old told me he no longer felt safe with him and did not want to be nice to him because of how mean he was to me. When she asked for an open marriage and I found out she had been cheating through our entire marriage with her ex or other women, I was done with the whole twisted thing at that point. What breaks my heart the most is that I broke up my prior marriage by her accusing my ex of cheating so she could move in on me. I spent years in therapy unraveling that. Reader's Digest version. He was controlling of on a 5-hour road trip, and when we stopped to switch drivers, because I had to contribute exactly what he did even if our situations differed, I reached into our snack bag and grabbed a single Oreo. He asked, "Do you really think you need that?" Bitch. Yes, but I don't need you. Kick rocks. Clan. My dad died and 4 days later he lost it. Me accusing me of cheating and didn't stop for the next 3 years. I kicked him out within 6 months. It was like my abusive father came back from the dead. All because an old boyfriend had texted me on an old phone I never used and left behind for my ex-husband to see when I went out of town. The final straw in my divorce saga was when I realized our relationship resembled a Netflix show on endless loop. Same plot, different episode. It was like being stuck in a Groundhog Day of marital monotony, so I handed in my ticket to the same story. Different day ride and opted for the roller coaster of solo adventures instead. The infamous sock puppet incident. When I walked in on my ex hosting a sock puppet theater session with my prize collection, I realized our love story had become a puppet show of betrayal. It was curtains for us. The final act in a sock drama that socked me right in the heart. Lesson learned: beware of puppeteers in marriage. She loved Christmas, I couldn't be bothered with it, but I made an effort for her. I woke up at 5 a.m. Christmas morning to get the turkey started for Christmas lunch. Just as she came home from her work, Christmas drinks. Hammered. She would get drunk 2 or 3 times a week, and for someone in their mid-30s it wasn't attractive. When she drained all of my accounts and told me that she was moving in with her boss at the time, that she had been sleeping with for months, I didn't have much of a say actually. That was almost 20 years ago now, and I'm happy to say that I will never ever do that again. It's way safer to just not get involved with someone, between death, suicide, or divorce. And then, in the midst of my crisis, they asked if their abusive parent could live with us again because we'd already sheltered them once and it went so well. Click. Suddenly I just didn't care anymore, said sure, and started looking for a place to live. 19 years and she decided she would only be intimate with her girlfriend. I, 43 meters at the time, had no choice in the matter. I could have a girlfriend if I wanted, she said. Done for so many reasons. But that gave me a gold ticket to end it. She still told the kids it was my choice to get a divorce. The realization that we had become apartment buddies instead of life partners. It was like we were running a cohabitation business without the benefits. The romance had moved out, and we were left with joint custody of a fridge. Time to close that chapter and let the next tenant of love move in. Him leaving with the mistress behind my back while I visited my parents for the holidays. Got a message from the guy watching my cats that a moving truck was in front of my house. He was supposed to be on a military assignment in another state. No, fucking the woman in the next town over.